Hello all and welcome to Great Delton. Today is part 2 of the track detail video. When I last left you I had started applying the ballast and now that is all finished and it is ready for the second part, which is adding the track details after ballast. A couple of other things I've done since the last time is I've neatened up all of the ballast that was on the track and I've added in the black cables to go in the orange trunking. I've done that using this, which is actually the rigging from my ship, we all know, and it seems to be the perfect thickness, and I've coated it with a bit of PVA to give it a bit of a gloss shine, and then I've just stuck it down and it looks sort of like the cables that you'd see on the main line. So moving on, and we shall continue with all of the rest of the detail now. The first thing I'll be adding is these AWS ramps. Now, AWS ramps alert drivers when they're approaching a signal which could either be at caution or stop. So they have to be sort of strategically placed a few hundred yards before signals. That's difficult to replicate on an N-gauge sort of small layout, so I'll be putting them here and here for these two lines which approaches this signal, and obviously the station signals. And then down here, another one on that line as it's bi-directional, and one here for approaching the station signal and what would be another signal in the distance. So I'm using the Pecco AWS ramps as that's the only ones I could find in N-gauge, and I'll be painting them with this rail match yellow and the rail match aluminium. So I'll get on with that. I'll put those in, which I'm just going to do with some PVA glue probably, and then we shall move on. So that's all 4 AWS ramps installed now. The next thing I'll be moving on to is some lengths of rail and sleepers. These you might find at the side of the rails just sitting there, either left by permanent way teams or strategically placed so they're easy to replace in terms of a rail failure. So what I've done is I've taken some flexi-track, I've cut it to approximately 60-foot lengths in N-gauge, which is roughly 12 centimetres, and then what I'll do is I'll stick these on. I've painted them in a rust wash by Humbrol, and then I will go over them with some sleeper grime with the airbrush to make it look like they've been sitting there for quite a while. The shorter lengths are just offcut, so I'll have these all in a big bunch together, and then these will just be sitting either between the tracks or at the side, along with the sleepers as well, so I shall get on with that now. So all of the rails and sleepers are now stuck down, and already with all these details you can see how much it's bringing it to life and how much more interesting and busy it looks. The next thing I'll be moving on to is actually weathering the track. Now the reason for this is because the details that I'll be sticking on afterwards, I'd either like them to be pristine or I'll be weathering them individually. This is supposed to be quite a modern layout, so things have been newly built and they wouldn't be that old and weathered. So the way I'll be weathering the track is I've done a few test patches over here. Now what I've done first is I've painted the actual rails with the Humbrol Rust Wash, the same as the lengths of rail that I've got stray sitting between the tracks. And then I've gone with some sleeper grime. These are just a few experiments, it won't look like this, but I've gone with some sleeper grime on the edges and a bit in the middle, and then some roof dirt, and then some heavy weathering over here for probably in the bay platforms where you'd see a lot of diesel spillages, and I've done that with some Humbrol black wash. So I'll get on with the weathering now. I'll be using the Iwata Neo airbrush, which is a dual action one, and then I've just got a cheap, well it's not cheap, but a £80 Amazon compressor, which is quite silent, as the only time I ever get on the layout is late at night, so I don't want to annoy the neighbours, but it does its job, although it did come damaged and I had to make a bit of a repair on it because it came from the Czech Republic. But other than that, it works fine, it's quite silent and it does the job for what I need. So I'll get on with the weathering now and I'll get back to you when that's all finished. So that's all the track weathering complete. I don't think it's turned out too badly, considering this is the first time I've ever airbrush weathered, other than the little bits of practice I did down here. I've gone over the first initial layer with obviously the rust Humbrol wash, and then I've gone over with sleeper grime, and then roof dirt in the middle of the tracks all the way down. I've kept any areas that I've wanted to clean, like the orange trunking and the AWS ramps. And then into the station where you'd expect trains to stop a lot more, we've got some Humbrol black wash, which has created sort of oil, coolant, fuel spills type effect. And then in the bay platforms where the DMUs will be parked and there's be a lot of soot and exhaust, I've really gone for a really heavy weathered effect. I've weathered all the rails and the sleepers and the catch pits and everything. I might give those a little bit of a clean up. The only thing to do now is clean the top of the tracks, obviously before the paint dries too much. To do that, I've got the Pecco adhesive rubber, which is a very, very good rubber. You can get dirt like that, it will just come with a bit of elbow grease straight off. It is a really good rubber and I'd recommend it to anyone who manually cleans their tracks. It has lasted me a year. It's dirty, the actual rubber, but it still gets it all off, and the trains work flawlessly on it. So I'll get all the track cleaned up and then we'll move on to the next part. The next thing I'll be adding is the walkway from the signal box to the platform. To do that, I've got some grated walkways left over from the signal gantry, and then I'll be surrounding them with the scale model scenery, tubes, clamp style safety railings. I'll be spray painting that all in rail match warning yellow. So that's all ready to spray paint over there, and then I'll stick that on and we shall get back to you. So that's the initial walkway now installed. What I'm going to do next is install these tube clamp railings along the length of some of the walkway, and then where you see these double stretches of trunking, what I've done with some of the extra graded walkway is I've painted it in aluminium, and then I'll be using that as platforms for the relay cabinets. These relay cabinets are for the ratio kits. They just you just got to put them together. They come in 2 or 3 pieces. Stick them together, and then I've painted them aluminium, and then I've gone over some of them with a rust wash, the same as what I use for the rails, homebrew one. Some more heavily than others, so it gives a bit of variation, and then I'll just plod those on top. And if I have any of these railings left, I will surround these platforms with them, as to make it a little bit safer for the engineer to work in them. So I'll get on with that now, and then we'll get back to you. That's the walkway now completed, and I didn't quite have enough of the railings to surround the relay cabinet platforms, but it's something I might add in the future. For now, they're all installed and dotted around in various places. So the next detail I'll be adding is some signage. I have these signs from Scale Model Scenery. There's quite a variety in there. I won't be putting too many around. The reason is I don't know what they all mean, so I'll do a bit of research into that, but I'll definitely have some stop signs at the end of the bay platforms, and speed limits, and then a couple of whistle signs as well. For anyone who's eagle-eyed, yes, I have installed a back scene just on this side at the minute, but there was a plan for all 4 sides. It's the Gauge Master one. It is a bit rippled as I applied it with PVA, but I'll see if I can fix that in the future. I think it looks a lot better. The town scene brings us to life a lot more. So, yep. Right, so I'll get on with installing some of these signs. These are quite easy. You just cut them out, stick them to the rodding that comes attached, and then stick them to the layout. So that's the signage now installed. The next piece of track detail I'll look at installing is some buffer stops for these bay platforms. I wanted to do something different from what I did in the branch line station, which was just use these wooden Pecco stops. They're quite fine as a buffer stop, they're functional, but they're a bit boring, a bit basic, and they're quite old looking, whereas I'm doing a modern layout, so I wanted something a bit more modern looking. After doing a web search, there isn't a great deal out there. There is, however, these. Now, these are 3D prints from a website called Shapeways. Shapeways is a company in which users will design something and then upload it and use Shapeways 3D printers, and then people can buy these prints, and then I'm guessing that the designer and Shapeways will take a cut of the profit each. Anyway, someone decided to design some buffers based on the ones at London Paddington, which are quite modern, upload it, and in Engage, which is quite handy, so I bought 3 of these. I think you can get 3, which are sort of £8 each, or you can get 12 for £48 depending on your needs. They do come unpainted, or you could have ordered them in one basic colour, but I wanted to do the painting myself as I wanted to add a little bit of detail to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the whole buffer stop in Rail Match Buffer Beam Red. If I can find the paint. So what I'm going to do is paint the whole buffer stop in Buffer Beam Red by Rail Match, and then I will add some aluminium to the sides where it would anchor onto the rails in aluminium Rail Match. And then at the front I'll be adding the white stripe for the buffer beam in just some matte white. So here's one that I painted up earlier, and it still needs a little bit of neatening up, but you get the idea of it. It's not too bad. It looks a lot more modern and interesting than the wooden ones. The only thing I will add to it after that is a stop light. To do that, I had to do a bit of market research again to find a light that would be small enough so it's in scale, and I have found these nano LEDs. Now these are from Small Scale Lights. They're £2.95 each, but they are tiny. I think they're less than a millimetre square, so they do the job well. Small Scale Lights is only a small website, but they do a good selection of these. They pre-wire the resistors in for you depending on the supply of your lighting circuit, and you can order them in 15cm or 30cm wire lengths. So I've got 3 of these, and I'll be mounting them on the buffer with this rodding, which is actually left over from these signs, which is quite handy, and it's already the right colour. So I'll just mount that on there and then cut it to length, and then pop the LED on top and somehow route the cables so they're quite disguised, and hopefully with that all together I will have a nice looking modern buffer stop. I might add another resistor in series to dim it down a bit depending on how bright the LEDs are. I'm going to test them before I install it, as it's only a stop light as a warning. It's not meant to be lighting up the whole area. So I'll get all those finished and then we shall get back to you again. Right, while those buffers are drying, I'm just going to add a few little bits and bobs to be dotted here and there. I've got some more trackside litter, if you want to call it, some pallets, fence panels, some tyres. I've got some more bits would have been used and left there by engineers, like the pipe reels and the oil drums, which are going to go near the signal box, and then I've also got some grit bins which are also going to go outside the signal box so they can grit the steps when it's a bit wet. So I'll pop all these in now. So here are the finished painted buffer stops. I've gone for something slightly different. On the front here I've painted the coupling buffer black and then painted the back aluminium, and then instead of white either side I've gone for just a white stripe across. But they're all finished and sort of ready to go on now. I've obviously painted the aluminium where the plates will anchor onto the rails, and overall I'm quite happy with how these have turned out. Obviously the only thing to do now is add on the nano LED and then they'll be good to go in. So we'll get on with that now. So that is all the buffer stops now installed and wired in. The one at the back just needs re-gluing as it's come away. I think the weight of the wire is putting it back a bit. But other than that, they look quite good. I've added in another 1.5 kilo ohm resistor in series with it, just to dim the lights down a bit. But overall, if anyone is trying to do modern buffer stops, I would definitely recommend this method. I think it's virtually the only option for N-gauge, and they look far better than the Pecco wooden ones. So yeah, rather happy with those. The very last thing that I'm going to add for this video is just some workers and some small grass tufts. You'll never see a pristine railway without any weeds, so I'll just be dotting these around along with some people to make the scene look a bit more busy, and what is a miniature village or modern railway without people anyway. Just got these trackside workers by Graham Farish Scenecraft, and then these tufts by Army Painter, sorry. I actually found these in the Warhammer section of my model shop, but they should suffice. They're a nice colour, and I think they're roughly the sort of scale I'm looking for, and sort of overgrown weed height. So I'll get these added, and pretty much that'll be finished. Well, that is it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've quite enjoyed putting the detail in, and I think it looks much better than what it did before. It looks far better than just this side with the plain track. So that'll be one of the next tasks. But overall, I'm quite happy and satisfied with the results. I think this looks really good now. Hopefully you've all picked up some hints and tips for doing your own track detail. I'm especially happy with the buffers, this area here, and the signal gantry really. So yeah, that'll be all from me. Obviously the next part of the build is the station, but I'm going to be getting on with a few side projects first of all to just fill the time and use up some of the resources which I have before starting buying everything for this. As always, if you enjoy the content here at Great Dalton, pop over to Western Parkway at Rule 1 Model Railways, where Nick is building a very similar, larger N-gauge layout with the sort of same stock and era. So, yep, that'll be it from me. I'll leave you with a couple of photos of the track detail, and I shall see you next time. Bye-bye.